Welcome to the eCom Collab Club Podcast, where operators, risk takers, and battle-tested founders drop the lessons that cost them time, money, and their sanity, and share what actually works so you don't have to pay the same price. Hosted by Peter Gardner and Adam Pierce, founders of the eCom Collab Club and Blend Commerce, the Shopify CRO agency.
Every BFCM, the same fight breaks out in that group chat. Brand team says, we can't torch our identity for a weekend sale. Performance teams say, cool story, I've got ROAS to hit. Somewhere in the middle, an ecom manager is sitting, stress eating last year's advent calendars. But today, I'm with William Ferreira, who has scaled more than 50 brands and sat on both sides of that table to ask one question. Can you push for record sales without looking cheap? William, welcome to the show.
Hi, Pete. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, right. Well, welcome to the eCom Collab Club, where we run completely off script, because that little thing that I just did was not scripted at all, was it?
Not at all.
William, give us the origin story. What shaped you, and how have you got to the position where you are today? Give us all the details.
Sure. So I am now 30. I've been running my own agency since I was 19. I have quite now a generic founder story. I think a lot of people are following suit, but I studied at Brighton Film School and had kind of a couple of years studying media and TV and film production, and saw an opportunity to take what I was learning on a producing side of things, which was very sales, relationship, and business development oriented. And during my time at film school, interned for a couple of agencies and really got to grips of how agency life worked and how these businesses ran. And ultimately made the decision in my second year of university to partner up with a friend of mine who was a graphic designer and launch a creative agency, which was called Unboxed. The goal ultimately was just to find a way to make some money while studying at university. And little did we know that business would blow up quite quickly for us. We were very lucky in the sense that we very, very early stages got access to some really interesting brands and partnerships. And as a creative agency, we offered everything from kind of brand development to graphic design, web design. And in those days, this is back in 2013, 2014, marketing, but more so from kind of a brand perspective, and organic social as kind of Facebook and Instagram were starting to blow up. And ultimately that business at the end of the second year turned into a full-time job for me. So I ended up moving to Bournemouth for my end of second year holidays. And we kind of made the promise to each other as founders that if we could turn it into a full-time role by the end of that summer, we would drop out of university. And that's exactly what happened. We grew the agency from two of us working kind of part-time on the business to having a team of 6 by that September, moving into permanent offices in Bournemouth. And it just kind of, it was a roller coaster from there. We were really lucky to partner with Virgin Startup. I represented them as an ambassador and kind of jumped on the young entrepreneur kind of bandwagon in Bournemouth and represented some really cool different initiatives down there, especially in the student scene and kind of youth development. And that gained us access to quite a few different brands such as Nike, Deliveroo, and Virgin as well. So we were able to kind of scale the business quite quickly. I was co-founder and MD of that company for 3 years until 2018, and then made the decision that I wanted to kind of expand my career outside of Bournemouth. So took the decision to negotiate an exit with my co-founder and moved to London, in which very quickly after about a year of consulting, launched ThreeSixty Brands, which I'm running today. And the journey of 360 started as what was known as Social Buff. So we initially launched as a social media marketing agency, working with everyone from startups to blue chip companies, primarily focusing on paid social, organic, and influencer marketing. And then COVID hit and everything changed for the world. And a lot of businesses needed to focus on how do they sell directly to consumers. And we were lucky that we're working with a wide range of different businesses who are kind of having those active conversations around digital transformation, launching direct to consumer propositions. And we were lucky to be at the forefront of those conversations and that change during COVID. So we pivoted to becoming a brand and performance marketing agency. We did everything from building Shopify stores, Amazon storefronts, to running paid ads, influencer campaigns and collaborations, but ultimately focusing on growth metrics such as revenue and retention. And slowly after COVID, we kind of reestablished ourselves as 360 Brands, which ultimately was an end-to-end full-service digital agency for e-commerce or direct-to-consumer brands looking to build brand equity, scale revenue, and scale retention. I ran that for a couple of years post-COVID with a team based in the UK. And then ultimately, as of the beginning of this year, entered discussions to join Common Thread Group, which we were then acquired by in April of this year. So for the last 6 months, I've been acting as Chief Growth Officer within 360 Brands and also working with the group on those are really exciting initiatives. And I guess a little bit about Common Thread. So we're a group of independent agencies, all specialize in different fields, but complement each other in different ways across strategy, brand development, marketing to out-of-home advertising, TV advertising, and obviously now offer full width of services with a team of just over 45, I believe, and located in London, Birmingham, Bristol, as well as Scotland as well. So that's been a real exciting kind of challenge for me over the last 6 months as well.
Awesome. And doing a bit of research and stalking you, I think you skipped over a bit more. You didn't have quite the normal upbringing either, right?
No. So how much did you find out? So yeah, I was born and raised in Asia from a very young age. My dad was part of kind of the expat boom in the 80s and 90s and ended up working for a company called Allied Domecq, which is now known as Diageo. So we lived in Taiwan, Singapore, Philippines up until about the age of 5 or 6. When my parents separated, I then moved back to the UK and spent my time between Asia and the UK for a little bit. And then my dad relocated to Amsterdam when I was about 8 or 9. So I spent the good part of my teenage years living between both the UK and Dorset and then in Amsterdam and kind of spending my time between those two places. So best of both worlds in sense of getting an understanding of kind of big city life, or Amsterdam isn't actually that big, but at least getting some sense of city life alongside the countryside. So yeah, it's very kind of unconventional upbringing in terms of location and culture and environment, which was something that I'm still very, very lucky to have experienced at such a young age.
Yeah, I'd say unconventional for yourself at the time that you did it, but that's becoming the norm for a lot of people now.
Absolutely, yeah.
And spending time with those different cultures as well. Would you say that was a big part of your driver in terms of entrepreneurship and that adaptability with change?
I think that the first one was kind of that I definitely developed softer skills because of that upbringing. So I think my ability to network, build relationships, and also understand, multicultural kind of collaboration and that kind of stuff, I think definitely played a massive part in kind of defining my skill sets. And then I think entrepreneurship definitely didn't come naturally to me. I didn't set out to have a career of my own that I carved out and start businesses. That really happened by accident. But I do think a lot of the drive came from my parents, both of them now actually in their later life very entrepreneurial, but never were until their 40s. And both of them now have, very successful businesses and incredibly hardworking. So definitely a lot of influence from them. And obviously they have kind of definitely taught me what hard work looks like and kind of developing those values and characteristics. But I would definitely say, a big part of my upbringing had a lot to say about what I do today.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit more about that decision that you had to make. You obviously made a deal there with your business partner that if it's going to become a full-time gig, you'll drop out. Talk us through that time and basically like what you were thinking.
I think in terms of my environment at film school, it was you had to be self-managed, and the way in which film school was set up was slightly different to typical university in the sense that you did a lot of work in the industry. You had to really focus on building your own network. It wasn't really one of those situations where you're just here to study. A big part of the curriculum was industry and practical experience. So you're already kind of ingrained in what I'd say at least is a kind of freelance or self-employed lifestyle.
Yeah.
You had to make a lot of effort to get ahead and create opportunities for yourself. So I think naturally that kind of ingrained this kind of mindset of, okay, let's create opportunities for ourselves. And then in terms of how it came about, I think it was definitely kind of a slow burner for the first kind of 3 to 6 months. It was, a few £100 here and there. And as a student, I was very happy to take that. But then there was this kind of flick of a switch moment, and it definitely came with some key contracts that we had signed and bringing in additional team members so we could focus on selling more instead of doing the work ourselves. And it was still a risk, and we kind of had that conversation in terms of there's no risk in working over your summer holiday, which most university students know it's about 3 months, so it's a good period of time.
There's a long time in the UK, huh?
Long time in the UK, and there's no risk to, both of us lived in Dorset at the time, so working from Bournemouth over the summer was not a risk. We stayed with parents. It just, a lot of people say, oh, you just sacrifice, what could have been a good 3 months off and doing nothing. We just decided to get our heads down and work. And the agreement was if we could at least create even a bare minimum basic full-time salary for the two of us, that would be the indicator that at 19, 20, if we can pay ourselves what most graduates are kind of getting paid in their first roles today, then that's enough to give us the thumbs up to go all in and go on that ride. And ultimately, that's where the decision came from. And I had a very supportive family environment. I honestly didn't do well in school at all. So I think they weren't surprised when I came to them and said, hey, I'm going to drop out and I've got an idea. I want to pursue it. And obviously being able to back that up with here's evidence of a full-time paycheck. I'm not going to be, struggling financially to make this work. Obviously there are sacrifices, but they were very supportive of it and had been through the highs and the lows and never really questioned it. So that also helps having, your family and your peers kind of support it from day one, where I know a lot of entrepreneurs experience the opposite. So I was very lucky in that circumstance as well.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I mean, look, you've gone from teenage founder to now leading inside a larger group. What has changed in the way that you lead and how you pace growth?
Good question. I definitely think my earlier 20s were more about the work I felt I needed to put in, and I had to do it on my own and do it at speed. And now my mentality is all about building a great team, doing it together, and then also focusing longer term. I think that's one of the main things is I think, especially when you're in kind of the initial phases as a founder, you focus on the next week, the next month. Sometimes the longer term vision becomes a bit blurry, and that's okay. But I think now my mindset is around building great team, doing everything I can to support the growth of that team, empowering them to do their best work, and then ultimately that best work will then result in happy clients and successful growth of the business. So I think it's just doing as much as I can to support that, and also in a sustainable way. I burnt out a lot when I was younger, and obviously when you're in your early 20s, you have that kind of untapped energy and you can kind of ride the wave a bit, but only for so long. So I definitely say it's longer term thinking and investing in, the right areas of business growth to achieve that.
Yeah. And it's so important what you say there is getting the right team in place that you can trust. And, from our side, it's like, we've got that team that we can literally stand by, and I run the marketing, Adam runs the sales, and it's just like you just know that your team's going to deliver on this, and it's an awesome feeling as a founder when you get to that point and you no longer have to be that person that's doing that hard graft. And it's awesome when you get to that point when it's like, hey, like my team actually knows more than I do on this stuff as well.
100%.
Cool.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's probably where the major mindset shift has been, is identifying what my strengths are, which I think a lot of founders struggle to do in early stages, really focusing on that, and then allowing to delegate and put trust in other people to do the other things really, really well. And that not only is about my team, but also what kind of led me to deciding to join Common Thread was the big conversation around that acquisition was, let me focus on my strengths, which ultimately is commercial development of the business, sales, team building, versus, being someone who's doing a master juggling act, which a lot of founders have to do. But then when you want something that's a little bit more kind of sustainably driven in terms of growth, and you want to make sure that you're doing it in a way where you can focus on the next 10 years instead of next 2 years, I think it's really important to be very self-aware about what your personal traits are and double down on that. And the growth in our business in the last 6 months has been exponential in comparison to the past 2-3 years, purely because I've been given the freedom to just focus on what I'm good at. And I see that a lot in all the founders we work with. A lot of our brands are founder-led brands. And there's a time and place where you're required to do everything, especially in that new venture startup phase. But then there's also a time in that period where you then have to acknowledge where your skill sets lie and then put trust in other people to do the other things better than you.
Yeah. Tell us what the benefits are of from a client perspective of working with Common Thread Collective, with the fact that you guys have these it's the different independent agencies within the group.
Yeah, so I think first of all, we're seeing this on an industry basis at the moment, but we're seeing companies either taking teams entirely in-house, and mainly that's e-commerce brands with a really strong kind of eCom led founder. But actually what we're seeing across the board, whether it's startups, scale-ups, or global brands, is a lot of these companies are consolidating their teams, making them leaner in-house, looking at fractional support. But ultimately, the challenge with that is then having to manage 4 or 5 different agencies. So I think the biggest selling point for Common Thread is the fact that we can come in and fulfill A to Z, and also give that kind of fractional leadership from a strategic standpoint to support those brands across multiple areas of their business. And I think it's a good entry point for us, to be able to go in and say, look, this is what your growth strategy needs to look like. We can look after your growth marketing. We can focus on your brand marketing for e-commerce and direct to consumer. But if you've got ambitions in retail or you have ambitions in out of home, Common Thread can then obviously come in and support on that. So I think it's a great way for us to also be a one-stop shop for those brands. But ultimately, as a company across now 5 agencies, we can support each other's growth in a way that is far more integrated than it would be if you had other third-party agencies working on the same case. Now, that doesn't say we don't partner with other agencies, but it definitely means to at least the client, they have one point of contact and they know that that one partner is delivering on everything they need, but still retains the specialism and expertise in the niche structure that we've got as independent agencies still.
Yeah. I mean, it's bang on exactly what we're seeing as well. It's brands are wanting niche service providers, but the issue with that is you're not getting this one agency that you're just working with. So it's like you guys are getting the best of both worlds with the group. You know, we're doing it now quite a bit. We partner with email marketing agents, we partner with performance agencies, we partner with SEO agencies, and we take that on that we've got to work with them in the background. And it's often you come in as a CRO agency and you go, okay, well, look, all the other agencies are sort of already in place there. We coming in now to try and get to that next level.
Yeah.
And we often will be like, hey, can you introduce us to your SEO agency? If we don't know them, can you introduce us?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we can. And then you reach out to that agency and it's just crickets.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, guys, if you help us, we can help you. And, you know, for the e-commerce brands that are listening, 100% encourage your agencies to talk to each other. Look for agencies that actually have conglomerates or have specialist partners that they work with as well. It is so much easier. And if you can get everybody on that same page, it just makes life a hell of a lot more simple for everybody. And everybody, you know, every single one of those agencies has got the same goal. They all want to make sure that you succeed, because if you succeed, then the agencies succeed as well. So, yeah, that's my little pitch there for specialist agencies. Let's get into what we actually really going to be talking about. I know we're quite deep in with 20 minutes already passed, but from when people hear brand versus performance, what do they usually get wrong before they even start?
So I think the biggest misconception is that brand and performance marketing operates independently from each other. And a lot of the conversations we have with brands is they see it as two entirely different areas of focus. I think the important thing here is understanding that if you treat them as one and have a strategy that integrates the two, one fuels the other. And so our approach has always been brand work needs to be performance ready, and performance needs to be focused on not just short-term drivers in terms of revenue and profit, which most of the brand founders we speak to want to prioritize, but also understanding one is short-term versus long-term thinking. If you structure them together, ultimately you're going to see growth at a much more rapid speed than just focusing on one or the other. And I think in a world that's very, very noisy at the moment, what we're seeing is a lot of brands focus on performance because, like every founder, you want to see quick results, you want to see quick growth metrics, and then you hit a ceiling and you wonder why you've hit that ceiling. And that's because we're in a world where everything's becoming more accessible from an advertising perspective. It's hard to get people's attention. And the only way you can do that sustainably over a long period of time is to marry your brand marketing with your performance channels and ensure that they're working hand in hand. So biggest misconception for us is a lot of brands treat it as two different things. And usually we see it siloed as well from a team perspective. And a lot of the time we have to come in and kind of be that bridge between even the internal teams to help them understand how one benefits the other. Yeah.
Is it like essentially what you're saying is with non-e-commerce businesses, it's that fight between, hey, that you've got your marketing team and your sales team, and they always fight for different things. You're saying brand and performance, it's exactly the same thing. It's really better if everybody just joins up because ultimately they work hand in hand.
I think a very good analogy in terms of the sales structure from a retail perspective. They're definitely not the same thing, but I think they fuel each other in a way that when working together, you'll see better results longer term than if you just focus on performance marketing, which is the main narrative that we see. at the moment.
Yeah. And just for those listeners that are possibly not as technical and don't quite understand what we're talking about with branded performance, what's the definition of brand and what's the definition of performance here?
So from my perspective, brand is what builds trust, community, culture, and ultimately reputation over time. Yeah. Performance is what drives immediate acquisition of customers to generate revenue, profit, and retention in terms of email signups, and ultimately ensures that you're generating revenue alongside obviously building a brand message that consumers buy into.
Yeah, and is that strictly paid, or are you talking about other forms as well?
No, I think performance marketing spans across quite a few different areas. I think most commonly for e-commerce brands, it starts with paid, but there's also obviously a lot of different verticals. For us, our main kind of acquisition drivers are primarily paid or CRM, but we also see the likes of affiliate marketing, SEO being kind of core areas of that as well. But ultimately, it's the thing that's going to drive traffic as soon as you turn it on, immediately drive kind of demand for your product and the purchase of that product. So if you think about anything that's kind of a core traffic driver, is ultimately going to be majority driven towards performance marketing.
Okay, and let's go back to the brand side then. What are you seeing? Maybe it's the top three. What are you seeing the biggest drivers on the brand side right now, and the biggest levers people can be pulling from a brand perspective?
So I think, especially in e-com, what we see is a lot of brands are scaled quickly based upon running ads. And I think sometimes it has that kind of blinkered effect where they don't realize that there's so much more the brand can do and talk about in order to connect with its consumers. So I think, the three kind of core drivers from a brand perspective that we see, and this isn't, in my opinion, it isn't new. It's not a secret sauce, but I think it's just getting an understanding of the consumer's perspective other than problem versus solution. And other than, an immediate, I have to buy this product based upon either a trend or it being as I said, like a problem versus solution product that everyone's trying to get their hands on. The key focus for me is how do you build a brand world that consumers can be a part of. So that's kind of the overarching goal, is how can you get consumers to align with your brand's mission, vision, and values and messaging, where they're going to be that customer for the next 5, 10, 50 years. Three core drivers for that, in my opinion, is building brand association. So not only building your own world, but being part of a wider world of other brands that all share that common goal, vision, or values. And I think a really effective way in which e-com brands do this is as simple as getting marquee listings that are really well known to the consumer. So in the UK, that would be Selfridges, Harrods, making sure that you are front and center and associated with those brands. Second one is advocacy. So have other people talk about your brand. And ultimately, in layman's terms, that is influencer marketing. But I think really focusing on actually authentic, real relationships with your consumers and the community. We see this being done really well in the health and wellness space at the moment, where they're going further than just the digital platforms and building in-person experiences, activations, and events for their customers and their community. And then I think the third one is ultimately your brand communication strategy. So how do you communicate in a way that's different from others, both creatively, but also in your messaging, that is going to make you authentic in the space? And I think a lot of brands struggle to find what that is outside of the immediate performance marketing channels. And I think most of the conversations we have with brands at the moment is around brand strategy. They sell really well, be so trending products, or they've got something that other people in the market don't offer, and they've capitalized on that. but then they're thinking, how do we make this a long-term situation where we can get acquired by Estee Lauder or LVMH? And that requires you to do something above and beyond from what everyone else is doing from a performance marketing standpoint. And ultimately that comes to your brand strategy and brand activation.
Yeah. How does a brand then go from building a community, building their brand, and then getting bought out by an Estee Lauder from that perspective, and not just losing their complete identity at that point?
So there's always that challenge of ultimately when you sell, is the brand going to retain its unique positioning, its tone of voice, its identity? I do think it comes down to what the founder wants out of that acquisition, and ultimately if they are the majority owner, it will be based upon whether their goal is financial success or brand legacy. And usually what I can see, and especially being part of both brand side in fundraising and in some cases over the last 5 years, some acquisitions, the right founder usually will choose the right partner. So if it is, I want brand legacy, they will fight for the right person to acquire them. In other cases, and a lot of the time, and quite rightly so, I don't blame them, if they want a big multiple and they want to kind of wash their hands of the business they've built over the last 10, 20 years, in some cases it is just going for the best payer. And sadly, that's why we are seeing some really great brands die out, because they've been acquired, sold for a great multiple, and then, new ownership doesn't have the same kind of passion and understanding of the consumer as what the founder did, or what the founding team or the senior leadership team, or even, the employees of that company originally did. And I think we're seeing that a lot at the moment. And I think it paints a really negative picture for e-commerce, because I think a lot of e-commerce brands have struggled with this. We're seeing e-commerce kind of get slated as a non profitable kind of market for people to invest into. But I think actually what we're seeing is a lot of people acquiring those companies and not knowing how to manage or scale them efficiently, which paints a bad picture for everyone else kind of looking from the outside in or in the inside out.
Yeah. And on that community front, let's go a little bit deeper, because it's actually a topic that comes up all the time within the podcast. And I know when we've got the in-person events, everybody talks about community. And personally, I've got I feel like it's a disconnect word. It's the wrong word, but I don't know what the word should be. But what would your definition of community be for an e-commerce brand? Because it's not a Slack channel. It's not like a group chat where everybody can be. And I think that's what people's mind goes to when they think of community.
Yeah.
What is community for a brand?
From my perspective, it is for a brand and for the individual, it is a group of people who share a common interest. And I think that's kind of the basic level terms for, ultimately where community starts. And then them having a shared interest in a mission, vision, or journey that is more than just themselves. And this is why I talk about how health and wellness is doing this really well at the moment, because I feel like they are really ensuring that they are empowering and kind of inspiring a lot of people to come together and connect. But I do think it is about connection. I think ultimately, if a brand can create a connection with a consumer, but ultimately then connect consumers to each other, and be the foundation to that, and have a shared purpose, then I think that's ultimately how the development of a community starts.
Yeah. And how is the brand connecting consumers in that essence? Like, are they going and becoming like the sponsor of a big event that's for that community? Are they then positioning themselves and then actually using performance as, essentially within that branding space? What are some other ways a brand could do that?
So I think if you're talking about a brand that doesn't have substantial budget, so let's say you're a startup or scale up, the best way to do it is to actually partner with other brands to start with. So being able to find your big brother or sister who is willing to advocate your brand because you complement maybe their brand and products, that has a bigger audience that allows you to piggyback off of that audience and contribute it in a positive way. So you see this a lot with, like, let's use run clubs as a really good example. So most run clubs are going to be hosted by either an apparel brand or a nutrition brand. That opens a huge amount of opportunity for those other brands and products to kind of collaborate on it. So if you go down to, for instance, I in London used to go to Battersea Park, and Battersea Park always used to have a pure sport run club that was sponsored by NOCO or Tenzing Energy Drinks, and that usually had some sort of collab with a shoe brand, whether that was Rad or in some cases Puma. And you see that kind of time and time again, especially with fitness events and that kind of thing. And that then translates over to other industries, make it obviously, again, relevant to that market. But I think what you usually see is you see one kind of hero brand owning that experience, and then smaller brands contributing to it in a way that adds value to the consumer. So also similar to influencers think about who are the brands that I want to be associated with to then market to my audience. And they have to be picky about who those brands are to firstly retain their brand image and their values, but also make sure that it's beneficial to their consumer, to their audience. And I think brands need to do the same. And the brands that are winning are the ones that are community first, in my opinion.
Yeah. And in terms of sort of that authenticity word and how brands are doing that, how's, in your opinion, social media has changed a hell of a lot recently. We've obviously got this whirlwind of the fact that it's now short form video that's driving things. We've got brands that have to then come in there, going back to your roots of your studies of video right there. But it's video now is coming into play. It's not just static images. They've got to invest time on that, but at the same time, it can't be polished. From ads, like people just see straight through it, like TikTok platforms. The ads that you see on TikTok have to be completely raw. It almost has to look like you and I are speaking in this room. Yeah. That's how it is. It can't be edited. How are you seeing brands sort of balance that and go, okay, well, I'm still going to keep my branding, but I've also now got to be authentic.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer that a brand has kind of two objectives. First one is brand storytelling. Second one is taking a consumer on a journey. And how that is delivered has to be now taking into consideration the channel in which that story is told and the journey in which they're taking consumers. I don't think there's been too much of a drastic change in terms of how an overarching story is then delivered across different verticals. If we look at 50, 60 years ago, those verticals would be very different to what they are today. But usually the structure in which that story is told is very similar, where there is an overarching message, and then that message needs to be delivered in a way that is relatable to how consumers are watching or engaging with content. So from my perspective, it is making sure, especially with social, that you are taking that overarching message and story into consideration of the format it is going to be best digestible and engaging to the consumer. So I think the biggest challenge we see at the moment is especially bigger brands not understanding that the consumers have to be put first in this situation. So it's all about placement versus, from my perspective, creative, in terms of they need to marry together in a way where they complement each other. And we still see a lot of brands, global brands, they don't create something that's personalized to the consumer's preference when it comes to channel, platform, content format. So I do think, from my perspective, when we look at why, for instance, this kind of stripped back, still authentic, but really unpolished kind of content is working so well, is because we're seeing, obviously, first of all, attention spans are getting lower. So we can't run a 30-second hero video for consumers to engage with and buy products. we can do that on other channels. But if we look at specifically Instagram and TikTok, for instance, we know that it needs to be something that's, first of all, relatable, stripped back, and personable to them. And at the moment, we're seeing that through user-generated content, founder-led stories, BTS-style videos. There's still a space for that polished content, but it's got to be delivered in a way where it complements those channels and those other formats. We look at it as kind of this waterfall effect. You have the overarching hero campaign video, and you just need to take into consideration that needs to translate into a channel-specific format that consumers are going to engage with. And audiences have their place. We know that Instagram, TikTok at the moment, that is the format that works. But there's also a big space, especially for Pinterest. It's far more aspirational and curated versus YouTube, which we know is longer form, even though YouTube Shorts are very much coming into the core kind of market when it comes to interacting with YouTube. YouTube still has a different tone to Instagram and TikTok. So it's also a case of understanding what that multi-channel distribution needs to look like. But if you look at those 4 or 5 different channels from one brand, usually they all connect to one single message. But if you look at them individually on an individual basis and don't connect them, they're going to come across as something that's just personalized and authentic to you. But if you put 2 and 2 together, you'll usually see there's an overarching campaign connected to it in some way.
Yeah, I've got sort of a big leading up question. You've led us into it quite nicely, and probably set yourself up to really bust this one. But before we jump into that, you mentioned obviously founder-led stories within your brand. One thing that we're feeling is it's a trend at the moment. Well, it's been a trend probably for the last year and a bit, but is employee-generated content. What's your sort of thoughts on employee-generated content, and are you seeing it being used very well by the brands that you work with? And what's some cool examples for the people listening that you've seen with employee-generated content?
So I think first of all, we know, and this has been again part of like advertising and marketing principles for years, is people buy into people, and we know that trust is built in the most authentic way when it's even in a digital format, word of mouth, and it's advocated by an individual that's probably relatable to an individual. The brand that I think do this really, really well is actually Sheer Luxe. So as a magazine, they have, what I've seen has gone against the grain of other editorial platforms and magazines, where they've actually pulled back the curtain and shown people the inner workings of a company and how it's run, what the culture is, who the people are. And they've almost turned it into a TV show. And I think this is what people are looking for, is they're looking for connection, relatability, but also they want to understand and care deeper than what's at surface level. And I think employee-led content or founder-led content is doing exactly that. It gives them something to buy into more so than a product. And I think it is going to be the new version of, in my opinion, kind of what brand ambassadors used to be or what influencer marketing used to be. It's people see through the, rose tinted glasses, in the sense that they know what an influencer collaboration looks like. There's still a place for it, but they know what it is now. And I think what we know, because consumers are not stupid, they know what they're looking at, they know what they're seeing, and it's becoming easier to acknowledge what's marketing and what's not, and when they're being sold to. We know employee-led content is probably the rawest format of behind-the-scenes marketing that you could possibly have, where it is very much just stripped back. It's individual personalities. It's not as staged as anything else that you see online. And I think that's why it's working so well. What I would say, though, is I don't think enough brands are doing it. I seeing it a lot more actually on a B2B level than I'm seeing on a direct consumer level. I see a lot of really great companies now starting to do this. Some are just focusing on, let's say, a company podcast, but others are really focusing on, follow me on this journey. Every single week, it's going to be a new TV show behind the scenes of how we're running this company. And the one that just stands out to me time and time again is Sheer Luxe, because of how big of a content engine they've created from their own team. And that's something that I'm not seeing enough of, in my opinion.
Yeah. Have you got any tips of how a brand would go about and getting their team to actually start implementing this for them and getting them to start generating some content? Like, how do they start small and then scale? That's probably what I'm asking.
I think probably the easiest format is creating, I'd probably say a recorded podcast would be, because it's structured, it's repeatable, and it can be done in a way where there's kind of a dedicated time and space for it. I think that's probably my biggest advice is podcasts hold a lot of power because you've got video recording, you can do multi-channel distribution in different formats, and you can, create a lot of different topics out of a 1 hour conversation. I think it's a really good starting point. Doesn't have to be a founder, can be team. And I've seen that time and time again where it's different team members from different aspects of businesses. And then the second one, and I think this is where when you really start to scale it up, is you hire or you nominate a talk show host, someone who is the one with the camera and the microphone, and they're driving the conversation. They're putting the spotlight on, the internal workings of the team. So instead of putting responsibility on the individuals within the business to come up with content, post it, you have one person who's kind of driving that narrative. And that's what I mean by this kind of TV style show where people are coming on a journey where every week they know who the host is, they know the different characters within the business, and every single week there's something new to talk about. Yeah.
I think it's from a brand, I think that does that well. It's Midday Squares. The guys that, there's often those insights and it's raw as well. Like sometimes it's like they've had a horrible time. I can't even think of the examples, but like a warehouse is fucking burnt down or something. I don't know if that's even true, but something bad's happen and you get the raw emotions from them and you're like, geez, okay, these guys are laying it all out there, and I think those guys are hitting it very well. US brand. Let's take a step back to sort of what I was setting you up there for, and my apologies for setting you up in this bad way. You're talking about telling stories within that brand. You're talking about taking them on a journey with the branding. Now, every year, most brands, we get to this thing called Black Friday, Cyber Monday, where everybody is expected to go and torch those margins, put those massive big discounts onto everything, and you've got to chuck paid ads at it. So you've got to drive people because, hey, this is a crazy season. If you're not hitting these these growth metrics, you haven't done your job this year from a paid perspective.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And excuse my blunt language here, without fucking up your brand and making your price look like, that's the price I should be paying, not the price that you're running all year, every year.
Personally, I think, first of all, Black Friday, we know it's, for a lot of companies, it's the biggest revenue generating season of the year for them. So we know when it comes to what should we prioritize, brand or performance is going to win. And it should be prioritized in that sense, because ultimately that's where some of your best growth comes from. But I think a lot of it is in the language. And I think from an executional standpoint, a lot of brands really taint their message purely because they get their language wrong. And what I mean by language, as just like a really basic example, instead of offering, let's say, a 50% off site-wide offer, immediately consumers are going to associate you with a discount brand. They're probably also going to wait for that opportunity. So then you have an audience that's susceptible to only buying when there's a discount, versus creating something that feels personalized to them, as if you're speaking directly to the individual consumer instead of to a mass audience where you're just offering a blanket discount. So for us, it's looking at how do we change the language in the simplest of the ways. So example, a limited edition release. So getting people excited about something that they can't get from the current brand or product range, doing it in a way where it feels like, as part of your community or an existing customer base, there's something to look forward to, build anticipation and excitement. or looking at something as simple as a seasonal drop, or maybe a member first exclusive discount, doing it in a way where it doesn't feel like, oh, they haven't thought about me. And I think consumers are looking for that more and more, where you're only going to get as far as the initial sale before consumers are going to think there's no value here other than when they offer a discount, I'll buy the product because it's cheaper than their competitors. Instead of reaching out to that consumer on a personal level and saying, hey, we've taken into consideration how much we care about you, and we're only going to be offering this, bundle drop or this exclusive SKU to just this segment of customers because you are our loyal customer base. Doing it in a way where they go, oh, okay, great. I feel like, they're listening to me, and they're speaking to me in a way in which I feel, valued. And I think that's where language is such an important kind of metric that a lot of people don't look at when it comes to their performance marketing, because it is the simplest changes that can create the biggest impact in that sense.
So are you essentially saying no blanket discounts, make it very exclusive, possibly exclusive for existing clients that get bigger discounts? What about first-time buyers at this time? Is it stock? Is it clearance stock that you're just discounting? Is it new drops, limited releases? What have you seen work best from this perspective?
I definitely think all of the examples you just have given have been really effective. I think for us, there's kind of three core principles or offers that I think work time and time again. How you deliver it is probably the most important thing. But, again, in terms of just summarizing, when we create personalized bundles, we see this being really effective, especially for either first-time purchasers, or if they're personalized to existing customers, even better, because they feel like it's just for them. I also think gift with purchase is a really good opportunity for brands to educate new customers on other products. Great way to not push an upsell or cross-sell at checkout. It's doing it in a way where they feel like they get a freebie, and everyone loves a freebie, a taster set, and it doesn't feel forceful. So gift with purchase is one that I think is also quite underrated. I think it's really popular in a couple of key categories, but other brands haven't really caught onto it in maybe less popular markets. But beauty and cosmetics, it's really effective. But I think there's other categories that can do it well in other senses. We have one client that does this from an RTD cocktail brand. They typically will offer cocktail shaker or glasses, bespoke glasses, stuff like that. Just build on the experience from the initial purchase.
It's something that they want. It's not something that's just like, hey, I'm cool, you gave me this pen and I'm going to throw it out over here.
Yeah. And then I think the third one is like gated early access. You see this done in fashion really well. I think Represent are the brand that stand out to me that do this incredibly well. And usually it's gated early access, but also exclusive, or there's only a certain amount of quantity that can be sold. So it creates urgency, again, excitement. Everyone is kind of part of a moment. And a really simple example on a wider scale is you have a musician who announces a tour and their tickets drop, and everyone's like crowding around their laptops to try and get, tickets to the O2 or Glastonbury tickets. Like, it's exactly the same online in terms of the moment and experience, and people buy into that. They share it online, and if you can really create a moment out of it, it can be super effective, both new customer acquisition and also existing customers, but more so, I'd say, existing customers.
Yeah, you've just hit a nail on the head there. One of the other things is to get a bit more gamification onto the site as well during this time. Yeah, and don't make it just like, hey, cool, you're going to get a massive discount. No. £200 and more, you get 30% off.
Yeah.
So you force them. It's like, hey, look, I'm willing to give you something, but give me something in return here. Yeah. Then you get this other thing in return. So it's not just like, okay, cool, you can go and buy a t-shirt, you're going to get 30% off. You got to buy a t-shirt, you got to buy some shorts, you got to buy some flip-flops, and you got to go and buy a cap. And then all of a sudden, okay, cool, now you have your 30% off. Well done.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying with a free gift with purchase, and what I was saying is it can't be something that's arbitrary. It can't be something that doesn't work, but it has to be something that is a sticky product. It's got to be something that if you're giving it away for free today, it's because you want to get them back to buy that thing at a later date.
Yeah.
And we ran this with one of our clients a few years back. They had one product that was, not all their products were sort of had a repeatable element to them, but this one was a consumable product, super good, probably the best products like in their own branded. They sold Multi, they sold their brand and other brands on their website, but this was their stickiest product. Low cost, amazing gift to give to somebody because you knew the minute they started using this thing, they weren't going to the competitors for this product anymore, and they were coming back. And we saw that drive repeat purchases again and again and again, just by going, okay, cool, look, it's like a gateway drug. Here you go, try it out. We know you're coming back to it at this point.
Yeah.
One last question. We got about 5 minutes left here, and hopefully you can address this one pretty quickly. One of the biggest issues that people have during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is the fact that performance marketing and paid ads becomes so expensive. Obviously, those clicks are becoming more expensive. What's your game plan here? Because obviously, brands are wanting to up their spend to get more, not just because they're trying to get the same traffic off the back of that. Have you got any tactics for anybody listening around that?
Yeah, I would 100% say 99% of the time brands overcomplicate Black Friday and their strategy. I would say if you are conscious of budget, focus on one offer and one product, one journey, double down on that in a really, really effective way. Because what we find is brands want to do too many things. Each of them require its own thinking, approach, strategy, and spend. And when you split your attention across all those different things, what you find is if they're not done properly, you're going to be leaving money on the table and wasting money on spend. So if you are a brand that hasn't massively invested in Black Friday before, I would 100% advocate focusing on just one funnel, one customer journey, focus on one product, one offer, and focus on making that the best possible experience for that customer, not just for the initial purchase, but to make sure they'll come back time and time again after that. And I think that's the one thing a lot of people don't understand about Black Friday is it is a really effective customer lifetime engine if you do it in the right way. So I definitely say keep it as simple as possible and make sure that you're investing efficiently and effectively instead of just casting your net too wide across too many different things all at once.
Yeah. So I've had a few people talk about this in the past. It's turn off new customer acquisition and rather go after your existing customers or people that have already shown an interest in retargeting ads. Yeah. Would you say that's a strategy off the back of what you've just said there, or did you say you still want to get those new customers at this point as well?
I think it's really market specific and also depends on your product offering. So, if you are doubling down on what I'd say kind of a gifting offer, then new customer acquisition could be really effective for you. If it's a case of actually, no, this is really a product that is more aimed at existing customers and it will be harder to convert them based upon the requirement of education or they don't understand the USP, then I would say you probably need to think about a tactic in which you're focusing on existing customer base or finding ways in which you acquire new customers in a more cost-effective way than just running ads. Again, going down the route of brand partnerships, collaborations can be effective for that, but I would 100% say it's depending on your product and whether you think that product is going to be of interest to the customer during that period. So think about what they're looking for in that moment of time, not just we're going to try and sell all of our products because it's Black Friday. So you still think about the end customer, think about how you need to personalize your offer to them that's specific to that period. Because I think time and time again, people are focusing more on Black Friday as an opportunity to cost save for more so than Christmas than just getting good deals on products. Which is why Amazon have now carved out their own moment of opportunity to focus on selling everything at a discounted rate versus in your case, I think you're very much wanting to make sure that you're not just becoming, again, a blanket discount brand over that period to acquire more customers.
William, I could sit here and riff with you about this for hours, but we've come to the end of the show. Mate, really, really, really appreciate you dropping these wisdom bombs with us, hearing from your experience and you know where you come from and the transition that you've had to with what you're doing with branding and with performance, and it's really, really cool to hear those perspectives. You know, from a CRO agency perspective, I often, you know, I don't like Black Friday, Cyber Monday purely because I think so many people get it wrong. That the customer lifetime value at the end of the day gets tarnished, and also your brand gets tarnished because all of a sudden people think your product's not worth it. So it's really it's great hearing the other side of this and hearing how you see it and how you can protect that and make sure that you don't do it. So appreciate you sharing all your knowledge today, and thanks for jumping on. And
thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
All good. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do it? Where can they find you? And
so LinkedIn's probably the best, just William Ferreira on LinkedIn, or you can find our website. It's 360-brands.com. 360 the word, not the number. Feel free to reach out to me if you guys want to chat anything specific. More than happy to jump on a call and give more value if possible.
Perfect. Thanks very much, mate. And to everybody listening, please do like, share, comment. Cheers. Thank you. And goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the eCom Collab Club Podcast. Make sure you like, subscribe, and join our community at ecomcollabclub.com/community.